Can I sit here? Boy on crutches asks biker. The Hells Angel discovers a shocking story. The late November rain hammered the truck stop parking lot with relentless force, turning the asphalt into a mirror of gray sky and neon signs. A 10-year-old boy with metal leg braces sat alone on a wet bench outside the convenience store, protecting a faded backpack against his chest like it contained his entire world. When he finally stood on unsteady legs and approached the scarred biker eating dinner in the corner booth, neither knew that one simple question would set in motion a search that would span 3 states and save 2 lives. Dylan Hernandez had been waiting for 6 hours. The digital clock above the truck stop entrance mocked him with each passing minute, each one feeling like a small death of hope. His mother had kissed his forehead that morning, pressed $20 into his palm, and whispered that she'd be right back. Her hands had been shaking, her eyes were hollow, and Dylan knew, somewhere in the part of his heart that had learned to recognize lies, that she wasn't coming back this time. The metal braces on his legs dug into his skin beneath his jeans, a constant reminder of the childhood illness that had struck while his father was overseas. Polio, the doctors had said, caught during one of the many nights sleeping in cars or shelters with inadequate hygiene. The disease had withered his legs but never touched his spirit, though lately that spirit felt dangerously thin. His backpack contained everything that mattered: 3 changes of clothes, a worn photo of his family from before everything fell apart, and tucked carefully in the front pocket, his father's dog tags and Purple Heart medal. Dylan had kept them safe through 2 years of chaos, through a dozen different shelters and more nights in cars than he could count. They were proof that his father had been a hero once, even if he disappeared into the kind of darkness that swallows men whole. The diner section of the truck stop glowed, with warm yellow light that seemed impossibly distant from the cold parking lot. Through the rain-streaked windows, Dylan could see truckers hunched over coffee, families passing through on road trips, and in the far corner booth, a man sitting alone. The man's left arm bore a tattoo that Dylan recognized even from this distance: the Eagle Globe, an anchor of the United States Marine Corps. Dylan's stomach cramped with hunger. The $20 in his pocket felt like a fortune and nothing at all. He could buy food, but then what? The thought of calling the police terrified him. They would put him in the system, in foster care, and he'd never find his father. They'd been a family once, the 3 of them. They could be again, if only Dylan could find him. The man in the corner booth wore a leather vest with patches Dylan couldn't read from here, but the skull design was unmistakable. Hells Angels. Dylan had been taught to fear men like that, to cross the street when they approached. But he'd also been taught that Marines took care of their own, and right now, Dylan was out of options. He stood, gritting his teeth against the pain that shot through his weakened legs. The braces clicked softly as he walked, a sound he'd learned to hate because it announced his vulnerability to the world. The distance from the bench to the diner door felt like miles. The distance from the door to that corner booth felt like crossing enemy territory. The diner smelled like coffee and grease and something baking that made Dylan's mouth water. A waitress glanced at him with mild curiosity but said nothing. Other diners paid him no attention. The man in the corner booth was cutting into a steak, his movements precise and controlled. Up close, Dylan could see the severity of his scarring, burn tissue that crawled up the left side of his neck and disappeared beneath his collar, the kind of wounds that came from fire and explosions. "Can I sit here?" Dylan heard his own voice, steadier than he'd expected. "I'm looking for my dad. He's a Marine too." The man's fork stopped midway to his mouth. His eyes, gray and storm-colored, fixed on Dylan with an intensity that should have been frightening but somehow wasn't. Those eyes took in everything: the braces, the wet clothes, the backpack clutched too tightly, the barely controlled fear beneath forced bravery. "Sit." The word came out gruff but not unkind. "You hungry?" Dylan nodded, not trusting himself to speak. The man, his vest said his road name was Chains, flagged down the waitress and ordered Dylan a burger, fries, and a chocolate shake without asking what he wanted. It was exactly what Dylan would have chosen. They sat in silence while Dylan waited for his food. Chains went back to his steak, but Dylan could feel the assessment happening, the questions forming. When the burger arrived, Dylan forced himself to eat slowly, to maintain some dignity even though every cell in his body screamed to devour it. Your mom know where you are? Chains asked after several minutes. Dylan swallowed hard. She left. This morning. Said she'd be back. She ain't coming back. It wasn't a question, just a statement of fact delivered without cruelty. No, Dylan whispered. I don't think so. Chains set down his knife and fork with careful precision. And your dad? The Marine? This was the moment. Dylan reached into his backpack with trembling fingers and pulled out the dog tags. They clinked softly as he laid them on the table between them. SSGT. Robert Hernandez, USMC. O positive. Catholic. The effect on Chains was immediate and profound. He went absolutely still, his hand frozen halfway to the tags. Then he picked them up with a reverence usually reserved for sacred objects, turning them over, reading the name again and again. Where did you get these? His voice had changed completely, stripped of gruffness, filled with something raw and aching. They're my dad's. He left them with me. Before he went away. Robert Hernandez. Chains spoke the name like a prayer or a curse. Staff Sergeant Robert Hernandez, Helmand Province, 2012. Dylan's heart slammed against his ribs. You know him? Chains's scarred hand went to his neck, to the burn tissue there. Your father saved my life. There was an IED. Our vehicle flipped, caught fire. I was trapped, unconscious. Martinez dragged me out through a firefight, carried me 200 yards to the evac point, refused to leave me even when they ordered him to take cover. His voice cracked slightly. I owe him everything. The diner suddenly felt too small, too bright. Dylan's vision blurred with tears he'd been holding back for 6 hours, for 2 years, maybe forever. Then why did he leave us? Why would a hero abandon his family? Chains was quiet for a long moment, studying Dylan's face with those storm-gray eyes. When he spoke, his voice was gentle in a way that didn't match his appearance. What happened after your dad came home from Afghanistan? Dylan's story spilled out in fragments. His father's nightmares, the way loud noises made him dive for cover, how he'd started sleeping in the garage because he said he was dangerous, that the family wasn't safe around him. The final morning when Dylan woke up and his father was just gone, leaving only the dog tags and the Purple Heart. His mother's slow collapse into addiction as she tried to cope with loss and raising a disabled child alone. The descent into homelessness, the shelters, the cars, the constant moving. He has PTSD, Chains said quietly. Bad enough that he convinced himself you were better off without him. I've seen it before. Hell, I've felt it myself. That certainty that everyone you love would be safer if you just disappeared. But we weren't safer. We weren't better. We fell apart. Dylan's voice broke on the last word. Chains reached across the table and gripped Dylan's shoulder with surprising gentleness. Listen to me, kid. Your father is a hero, but heroes can be broken too. The war did something to his head, made him believe lies about himself. He didn't leave because he stopped loving. You left because he loved you too much, and his brain was telling him poison. I've been looking for him, Dylan whispered. Every shelter we stayed at, I'd ask. Every VA office I could find. My mom got mad when she caught me, said I needed to forget about him, but I couldn't. He's my dad. Something shifted in Chains's expression, a decision being made in real time. How long you been sitting outside? Since this morning. 6 hours, maybe 7. And you came to me because of this? Chains tapped the Marine Corps tattoo on his forearm. Dylan nodded. You're both Marines. I thought maybe you'd help, or at least not call the cops right away. I'm not calling the cops. Chains pulled out his phone, scrolled through contacts. I'm calling my brothers. We're going to find your father, Dylan, and until we do, you're staying with me. The conversation that followed happened in fragments Dylan only partially understood. Chains made call after call, his voice low and intense. Words like Martinez, brother who saved my life, and kid needs us floated through the air. Other bikers' names, Tank, Spider, Wrench, were mentioned. Plans formed rapidly, a network activating. 40 minutes later, 3 motorcycles pulled into the truck stop parking lot. The riders who dismounted were as intimidating as their machines, massive men in leather and patches, faces weathered by road and sun. But when they approached Dylan, their expressions were almost gentle. This is Martinez's boy? The one called Tank was built like his nickname suggested, with arms the size of Dylan's torso. "This is Dylan," Chains confirmed. "And we're going to find his old man." Spider, lean and covered in spiderweb tattoos, crouched down to Dylan's eye level. "Your dad pulled Chains out of a burning truck while insurgents were shooting at him. That makes you family, little man. We take care of family." The next 6 weeks became a blur of structured chaos that Dylan had never experienced before. Chains' apartment was small but clean, with a spare bedroom that became Dylan's own space, the first he'd had in 2 years. The first night, Dylan lay in an actual bed with clean sheets and cried so hard he made himself sick. Chains sat with him through it, not saying much, just present. The search for Robert Hernandez became a club-wide mission. Hell's Angels from chapters across 3 states mobilized, using a network that stretched into places official channels couldn't reach. They contacted VA hospitals, homeless shelters, street outreach programs. They posted on social media groups for veterans. They talked to their contacts in law enforcement, asking favors, calling in debts. Chains enrolled Dylan in the local school, walking him in personally to meet the principal. Dylan watched, amazed, as this scarred biker with gang patches explained the situation with surprising eloquence, ensuring Dylan got the support services he needed. Physical therapy was arranged for his legs, medical checkups, proper nutrition that began to fill out his too-thin frame. Club members rotated through the apartment, each one teaching Dylan something different. Tank showed him basic mechanics, letting him hand over tools while they worked on motorcycles in the garage. Spider taught him chess, patient through Dylan's fumbling early games. Wrench, true to his name, involved Dylan in fixing everything from appliances to furniture, treating the boy's questions with respect rather than irritation. Dylan learned that these men, criminals in the eyes of many, operated by a code as rigid as any military unit. They were loyal to the bone, protective of the vulnerable, and capable of remarkable tenderness beneath their intimidating exteriors. They became the uncles he'd never had, the support system that had crumbled when his father left. But every night, Dylan would take out his father's dog tags and Purple Heart, holding them like talismans. Chains would see him and say nothing, but his expression made clear he understood. Nothing would be right until the family was whole again. The breakthrough came on a Thursday in mid-January. Chains' phone rang during breakfast, and Dylan watched his face transform as he listened. The call lasted 3 minutes. When it ended, Chains looked at Dylan with something fierce and bright in his eyes. "We found him. Veterans Center in Nevada, 3 states west. He's been sleeping rough nearby, comes in for meals sometimes." Chains' voice was thick. "We leave in an hour." The ride west took 2 days. Dylan rode in a chase vehicle. Club rules prohibited passengers on long hauls, but he was surrounded by 20 motorcycles, their rumble a constant thunder that felt like protection made audible. They stopped at clubhouses along the way, where more bikers joined the convoy. By the time they reached Nevada, 40 bikes rolled in formation. The Veterans Center was a modest building on the edge of a desert town, surrounded by scrubland and endless sky. The director, a gray-haired woman named Marie, met them outside, her eyes widening at the sight of 40 Hell's Angels dismounting in her parking lot. "We're looking for Robert Hernandez," Chains said, managing to make it sound like a request rather than a demand. Marie's expression shifted to understanding. "The man camping near the wash? He comes in for lunch most days. Should be here soon." They waited. Dylan stood between Chains and Tank, his heart hammering so hard it hurt. Other bikers formed a loose semicircle, massive and silent. Shelter residents peered out windows, uncertain whether to be afraid or fascinated. Then Dylan saw him. The man who walked up the dusty path was a ghost of the father Dylan remembered. Gaunt to the point of skeletal, with a beard gone gray and wild, clothes that hung on his frame like rags. But Dylan would have known him anywhere, the way he walked, the set of his shoulders, the shape of his hands. "Dad." The word came out as a whisper, then a shout. "Dad!" Robert Hernandez stopped as if he'd hit an invisible wall. His eyes found Dylan, widened in disbelief, then filled with an expression of such anguish, joy, and shame that it was painful to witness. He took one stumbling step forward, then froze, as if afraid to come closer, afraid this was a hallucination. Dylan didn't freeze. He ran, his braces clicking, pain shooting through his legs with each step. not caring. He crashed into his father with all the force his small body could generate, wrapping his arms around a waist that felt like bones held together with wire. "Dylan," Robert's voice broke completely. "Oh God, Dylan, you shouldn't be here. You shouldn't have to see me like this. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I've been looking for you." Dylan's face pressed against his father's chest, breathing in the scent beneath the dirt and sweat, the smell that was uniquely Dad. "I never stopped looking." Robert's legs gave out. He collapsed to his knees in the dirt, pulling Dylan with him, shaking with sobs that seemed to come from somewhere deep and broken inside. "I thought you were better off without me. I thought I was protecting you. The things in my head, the nightmares, the anger, I was afraid I'd hurt you. You hurt us more by leaving." Dylan pulled back just enough to look at his father's face. "Mom couldn't handle it. She got sick. We lost everything. But I knew if I could find you, we could be a family again." Chains approached slowly, giving Robert time to see him coming. When recognition flickered in Robert's hollow eyes, Chains crouched down to their level. "Hey, brother." Chains's voice was rough with emotion. "Remember that day in Helmand when you dragged my stupid ass out of that burning truck?" Robert's face crumpled with fresh tears. "Chains, Jesus Christ, is that you? It's me. And this brave kid just showed me what real courage looks like. He came to me for help because he saw your tattoo on my arm." Chains touched the dog tags around Dylan's neck. "Been wearing these, carrying your Purple Heart, searching for you in every shelter he could find." Robert looked from Chains to the 40 bikers standing silent witness, then back to his son. "I don't understand. You saved my life, Martinez. Now we're going to save yours." Chains stood, extending his hand. "We've got a plan. Treatment program for PTSD, housing, job at a club-affiliated garage. But you've got to want it. You've got to want to get better. Not for us, but for him." Robert looked down at Dylan, who stared back with desperate hope blazing in his young eyes. "I'm scared," Robert whispered. "I'm scared of what's in my head." "Good," Chains said. "Being scared means you're smart enough to know you need help. The Veterans Center here can refer you to a program in our state, 3-month intensive therapy. Dylan stays with me during that time, getting proper medical care, going to school. You do the work, you get healthy, and then you get your son back. But you've got to commit. Right here, right now." The silence stretched like taffy. Dylan held his breath, his fingers clutching his father's shirt. Finally, Robert nodded, the movement small but definite. Okay, I'll do it, whatever it takes." The journey back was different. Robert rode in the chase vehicle with Dylan, the two of them holding hands in silence most of the way, words too inadequate for what needed to be expressed. Chains had made calls, pulled strings, activated that network of connections that seemed to extend everywhere. By the time they returned, Robert had a spot in one of the best PTSD treatment programs in the region, fully funded by the club's Veteran Support Fund. The 3 months Robert spent in intensive therapy were hard. Dylan visited every Sunday, watching his father slowly emerge from the fog of trauma. There were setbacks, days when Robert couldn't speak, when the ghosts of Afghanistan were too present. But there were also breakthroughs. The first time he laughed at one of Dylan's stories, the first night he slept without screaming, the first session where he could talk about what happened without shutting down. During that time, Dylan's own healing continued. His physical therapy was yielding results. The braces hurt less, his walking improved, his strength increased. Chains had him tested for updated equipment, and the club held a fundraiser that paid for new, better-fitted braces that gave him more mobility than he'd had in years. School became something other than an ordeal. Teachers who knew his story gave him support without pity. Other kids, initially wary, warmed to him when they saw club members picking him up, these massive bikers who treated Dylan with obvious affection. It was hard to bully a kid who had 40 Hells Angels as honorary uncles. The day Robert completed his program, Chains and Dylan were there for the graduation ceremony. Robert stood with 15 other veterans, all of them looking healthier, stronger, more present than they had 3 months before. When he received his completion certificate, he looked directly at Dylan and mouthed 2 words. "For you." The apartment Chains had arranged was small but clean, with 2 bedrooms and furniture the club had collectively donated or built. Dylan walked through it with his father, both of them touching things with wonder, A kitchen table, a couch, beds with actual frames. It was modest by most standards, but to them, it felt like a palace. "We're really going to live here?" Dylan asked, his voice small. "We are." Robert knelt down, bringing himself to eye level with his son. "And I'm going to be the father you deserve. Not perfect. I've still got work to do. Therapy I'll keep going to. But I'm here, Dylan. I'm present. I'm fighting every day to be better." That first dinner in their own apartment was attended by Chains, Tank, Spider, and Wrench, the 4 bikers who'd become as much family as brothers in arms. They brought pizza and sodas and stayed late into the evening, their laughter filling the small space with warmth and life. Before they left, Chains pulled Robert aside. Dylan, pretending not to listen, heard pieces of their conversation. "The garage job starts Monday. Owner's a veteran too. Understands what you've been through. Pays fair, and if you need time for therapy appointments, you take it. I don't know how to thank you," Robert's voice cracked, "for everything. For finding me, for saving Dylan. You don't thank me. You show up. You be the father that kid never gave up on. You stay healthy. That's the thanks I need." Chains gripped Robert's shoulder. "And know that you're not alone. You stumble, you call. The Brotherhood is here. Always." 3 months later, the club's annual spring ride had a new participant. Robert Hernandez, prospective member of the Hells Angels, rode his own motorcycle for the first time in years, his son Dylan in the sidecar beside him. Dylan's new braces gleamed in the sunlight, his face split in a grin as they rumbled down the highway surrounded by 40 brothers. The ride ended at a park where the club held its annual fundraiser for homeless veterans with PTSD. Robert and Dylan helped set up tables, served food, and talked to other struggling veterans about the program that had saved Robert's life. More than one man listened with tears in his eyes as Dylan explained how he'd never stopped searching for his father, how he'd asked a scary biker for help, and how that one moment of courage had changed everything. Chains watched them from across the park, father and son working side by side, both of them healthier and stronger than they'd been 6 months before. Tank appeared beside him, following his gaze. "You did good, brother," Tank said quietly. "The kid did it," Chains corrected. Little man with leg braces who refused to give up, who saw past the leather and patches to the Brotherhood beneath. "He saved his father. We just provided the resources. Still, Martinez saved your life in Helmand. Now you've saved his." Chains shook his head. "No, I helped him save himself. That's all any of us can do. Help each other find the strength that's already there." As the sun set over the park, Dylan stood between his father and Chains for the group photo that would commemorate the event. His smile was genuine and complete, the smile of a child who'd been through hell and come out the other side still believing in heroes. Because he'd learned something important. Heroes weren't men who never fell. Heroes were men who got back up, who asked for help, who fought their demons every single day. And sometimes, heroes wore leather and patches and rode Harleys, their scarred hands gentle when they reached out to lift up the fallen. The motorcycle engines rumbled to life like distant thunder, a sound that had once meant danger to Dylan but now meant family, protection, home. As they rode into the gathering dusk, 40 bikes in formation with father and son in their midst, the setting sun painted the sky in shades of gold and crimson. It was the color of hope, of second chances, of bonds forged in fire and tested by time. Dylan leaned back in the sidecar, his father's hand resting protectively on his shoulder, Chains riding point ahead of them, and felt something settle in his chest. It was peace, earned through courage and kindness, and the willingness of strangers to become family. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is ask for help, and sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is offer it. No questions asked, no judgment given. In that space between asking and answering, between falling and catching, lives are transformed, and the world becomes a little less dark. The convoy of motorcycles disappeared over the horizon, their taillight a river of red in the twilight, carrying with them a boy, his father, and the Brotherhood that had refused to let either of them fall. If you have enjoyed the story, tell YouTube to send you more stories like this by subscribing to this channel, liking the video, and leaving a comment.